What's going on, people? Today we are going to be doing a pretty chill video where I'm mostly just going to go over the sort of interview that I had with Arch Mage when it comes to Deepwoken, some of the questions I asked, because I really wanted to do a sort of sit-down interview where we talked one-to-one over voice call, but because of some time zone related stuff, we couldn't end up getting that done, so the best that I could have gotten, which I still really appreciated, and I'll be giving some shoutouts in a second, but the best that I could have gotten was some text responses, so it didn't really fit super well into the video how I originally planned, so I didn't use a lot of it, and I figured this is some stuff that's kind of important. It's some stuff that I wanted to talk about, but it wouldn't fit into the review, and it's also some stuff that Deepwoken players are probably curious of themselves, and they might not have this insight. So I figured, hey, why not come on here, talk about it, and give some people some more insight. Anyways, there's two big shoutouts I have to give before I start. The first is to Lulux44, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, who's a moderator on the Deepwoken team. They're basically solely responsible for me getting in touch with Arch Mage and being able to ask the questions I wanted to ask. For a little bit of background, I reached out on, I think it was Thursday, to one of the moderators on the server that I could get a DM to, and I never got a response back to them. And then on Sunday, I sent another one, never got a response. And then on Monday, I was like, well, I want to try to get this if I can. So I just copy-pasted a message to every single moderator that had an open message board. And eventually, I managed to get through to someone. Lulux was someone who actually used to watch my videos, which is pretty cool. And so they got me in touch with Arch Mage and basically made all of this happen. So shoutouts to them, thank you. And the other person who I need to shout out is not Kitty Meow Meow. Kitty Meow Meow is not the person that I'm shouting out. Are you the, do you want to shout out Kitty Meow Meow? Is that what you want? No, the person that I'm shouting out is not Kitty Meow Meow. It's Arch Mage himself, because he gave... You just bit me. Why'd you bite me, stupid cat? I'm trying to make a video. Get out of here. Anyways, shoutouts to Arch Mage himself, because he took time out of his day to answer my stupid and probably obnoxious questions that were mostly negative, and sort of calling out the game in a sense. So yeah, thank you to both those people for basically making this happen. Anyways, on to the first question that I asked. So I said, so I gotta say it, new player experience. What is wrong with you? What? You're making this really hard right now. You understand that, right? God fucking damn it. Gotta say it. New player experience. I feel like that's almost all I have to say. No, but on the real, are there ever going to be plans to make the player onboarding process better? As it is right now, you basically can't play the game without the wiki, not even death and drowning. An integral part of the experience is explained in the tutorial, and without some friends to guide me personally, I don't know if I ever would have made it past Lower Aricia, which is true, and I talked about that in my review if you saw it. Now, Arch Mage responded back and said, yeah, the user experience and onboarding isn't great. You don't say. We've made some updates to it recently with adding quests to get started. We've tried to go tutorial light where possible because we find that can often be off-putting or tedious. There's definitely a balance to be struck, and currently that balance isn't great. Death is meant to be a bit of a surprise, but I do wonder if there's room for a quest to be spawned in, like find a way out or some kind of explanation of why your health bar looks different. Yeah, I think the thing that Arch Mage maybe is missing here is that the tutorial is not forced upon you. And so making a better tutorial on explaining things and how things work, you just make it optional. Like it already is. When you start in at the very beginning of the game, there's a skip thing right at the start of the tutorial, and you could just not do any of it. So I understand where he's coming from. Like if you had to do the tutorial every single time you respawned, that would be awful. Like that would not be fun whatsoever. But there's a tutorial, I'm pretty sure it's like a starting flag. Like a starting flag where when you play, if you have the tutorial race or whatever, then it will start you at the tutorial by default. And then you can skip it if you want, but you probably shouldn't because you want to know how to play. And so I think if that's there and it's more fleshed out and gives you a better understanding of what you're doing, then that would be good. Because as I said in my video, and as I'm sure I'll say in the future, right now you basically have no direction. You get into the game, You go through the tutorial. It teaches you how to like the basic of basic controls, and how to level up your stats, which I mean, fair enough, you'll need to know that, but a lot of those things are sort of self-explanatory and you probably wouldn't even need a tutorial for, but the stuff that you do need a tutorial for, you don't have. So that kind of poses a problem. Like, you get in, and by the time you get to the docks, it says sail to Lower Aricia, and you go there, and that's it. And I don't think that ever goes away. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I just haven't like played enough or figured it out. But it says sail to Lower Aricia, and then that's a wrap. Like, I don't know. Maybe that should go away when you get there and say nothing. I'd almost think it'd be better. Because I won't lie, when I first played, I thought that there was something I was supposed to be looking for in Lower Aricia. But no, there isn't. It's just that's where the game opens up, and then you can do literally anything. And there's no sort of purpose, which is fine. But it's confusing when you have a quest marker that tells you to go somewhere, but it doesn't actually do anything, if that makes sense. Anyways, moving on. The next thing I said was, you probably won't answer this one, but I wanted to speak about the current paywall. Right now it's $5, and in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. But for your average Roblox player, that could be the difference between playing and not playing the game. I don't know what the current monetary situation for the game is, and I certainly wouldn't want it to be packed with microtransactions to make up for the lack of paid access, but I gotta ask, are there ever plans to make Deepwoken free to play? I think it'd easily be one of the most played games on the platform if it was, which I do believe, because there's a lot of crap out there, and Deepwoken, even with the paywall, is more played than a lot of the other games on the platform. Arch's response was that we've talked a lot about this internally, but the fact generally remains that a lot of our monetization is built upon slots, access, and rerolls, all of which wouldn't be viable with free access. We'd have to find other ways to generate revenue, which might mean we'd need more of the monetization strategies that we as players find irritating ourselves. Exploiters are mostly gone, but they could still really ruin people's fun, and there's no IP bans or anything like that to keep them out. At the moment, the paywall is a big obstacle for them from just alt-hopping when they get banned. Another thing is that paid access makes people do their research first before playing the game, which kinda helps with how difficult the game can be. It's not an outright no, just not something I'd really anticipate given how things are at the moment. And I get that. It's something that I mentioned in my review itself, where I talked about how if it meant that we were gonna fill the game with microtransactions, then paid access would just... It's kind of almost a forced reality here. It almost is a necessary evil. I do think it's a shame. I know there's a lot of you out there, and I see you in the comments where you're like, I would play Deepwoken, but I can't because I don't have money. And the reality is, on Roblox, the platform, there's a lot of kids on here that don't have any sort of disposable income at all, so they just kind of can't play. And that really sucks, because I think there's a lot of people out there who would probably enjoy the game that just sort of can't. But for those of us, like, if you have a job at all, you pretty much don't have an excuse. $5 is not a lot of money, let's be perfectly honest here. And if you ever have the ability or do buy $60-$70 games, like, come on, really? You're stressing about spending $5 on this game because it's free to play, to get access to a game that is more content filled than the $70 games. So I get where he's coming from. I understand. That's the kind of the response I expected, but it's still sort of a shame that we're never gonna see some of the people that would probably enjoy the game, and we're never gonna see Deepwoken reach those really, really high Roblox numbers that it probably could get if it was free to play. Now, this next one is the one that really kind of threw me off and bothers me. And that is, I said, there's a ton of cryptic and hidden things in this game. I'd say roughly 70% of the things you'll be doing in the game are hidden in some way. That being said, was it or is it ever considered that some people might not understand or see large portions of the game because of the lack of direction? And Arch's response was, yep. People missing non-important things is intended because we want the game to have a high replay value. We want people to suddenly realize just how much they've missed and learn about secrets through word of mouth. It creates an air of mystery around the game that's hard to find nowadays in multiplayer games. Probably doesn't paint a very good picture of the amount of content in the game at first glance though, so it's probably something that traditional game design would frown upon, but it's something we've always loved in games. And, like, this hurts my brain. There's a very good reason that this is frowned upon in traditional game design, and that's because, as I have said 1,000 times, and I will continue to say, Wikiwoken is unplayable without the wiki because you will miss very important things. It's not that people are missing non-important things. People are missing very important things. And something that I didn't ask about and I didn't have in my review video, which I should have, was talking about Voidwalkers and how stupid that entire sort of concept is, because it just kind of screws people over and there's no checks and balances for it. Like, there's no people who deal with Voidwalkers. It's just the Voidwalkers who kill people and the people who get killed, which is just not very smart. I don't know why they didn't have or haven't introduced some sort of anti-Voidwalker in a sense. But regardless, when you have stuff like PvP in the game, and the fact that Voidwalkers and such can appear literally just about right on top of you with wall hacks to exactly where you are and just show up and murder you with all of the permanent upgrades and stuff that they've unlocked, it's really important. It's not non-important, it's extremely important that you're on a somewhat level playing field with these people. Otherwise, they just maul you with stuff that you don't or can't get because you don't know how. And the other thing is the idea of suddenly realizing how much people have missed through word of mouth. That may have worked in the 1980s, but we're in the age of the internet. That's not how things work anymore. That works for about a week, and then wiki pages and stuff come out, and then everyone that knows how to do it has looked it up on the internet. It's not like people suddenly are going to talk to their friends and discussing all of the new secret stuff in Deepwoken. No, they're looking it up on the internet. And if they are telling their friends about the stuff that they found in Deepwoken, it's not stuff that they found, it's stuff that someone else found, put on the internet, and then they looked it up and then told their friends. Is that what you were going for? Because that's not difficult. It's not hard to go onto the internet and type in how to find Shadowcast in Deepwoken. That's not difficult. Like, anybody can do that. And so tucking away the Shadowcast NPC into this like back alley corner of the depths doesn't help anyone. It's not a super secret cool thing that you might stumble across. It's something where a Voidwalker shows up with Shadowcast and kills you with something that you don't have, and then you're like, what the hell is that? How did they get that? And you Google it. Like, so that way you understand what it is or you don't die from it again. You know? So I don't know. I don't think this is one of those things that it's like, oh, we're breaking the norms and going against traditional game design. No, it's more of a we're going against the norms and just making poor decisions that hurt people for not constantly looking things up on the internet. The next thing I said was, on that same vein, are there ever plans to have any sort of main quest line of sorts that would guide you to all the different regions of the game? I know it could get all complicated with permadeath, having to replay things and stuff like that, but I figured I'd ask since a lot of games use a main quest in a sense to guide players to all the different play areas the game has to offer. Ark responded and said, it's certainly not impossible, it's just been something that's been hard to accomplish due to our content schedule. Weekly updates mean that we usually end up prioritizing content we can complete in a week versus longer form content like written quests. We've always wanted to add more story and life to the game, it's just fallen somewhat by the wayside. There's also the downside of a main quest that once you've beaten it, having to redo it becomes rather tedious. I think we'd rather have a healthy selection of more medium-sized quests like the Forge of Sin quest, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what that one is, available for players to engage with, something like a good-sized quest for each faction maybe. I don't know if Ark exactly got the point of the question that I was asking or exactly what I was referring to here, which is also one of the reasons that I wanted to have a more one-to-one voice call sit-down interview rather than text, because I would have been able to explain myself better, but I didn't want to just go through and basically argue with him in his DMs, so I didn't respond back to him here. But I was more referring to the things in line with the Lower Orisha kind of deal, because it's clear to me that Deepwoken definitely has a sort of hierarchy of where it wants you to go in a sense. Like, it doesn't technically have level gates or level requirements on where to go. Like, you can go to the, I can't remember what the other Luminant is called off the top of my head, but you can go over there to like the Hive and the desert area, and you can fight the Threshers and the King Threshers and the Golems and all that kind of stuff and get a ton of XP early if you're good enough to fight them. But it's clear you're not supposed to go there right off the bat or early until you've leveled up from going to Lower Orisha. And it's clear they want you to go there because you get a quest that says go to Lower Orisha. So it's very obvious to me that they have these sort of, it's somewhat linear in the path that you should take if you're new especially. And so I was more referring to less of a written quest, I guess, of like, you need to go here and do X task, and more of a, I don't know, an updating of where the game wants you to go. So maybe you get to level 10 at Lower Aricia or level 5, and then it removes the Lower Aricia little node and puts it somewhere else. And this is where you should go next if you want to test yourself, and that's sort of the next step, if that makes sense. Because right now it's very unclear, and you're basically kind of going in the dark. Like, you know that Lower Aricia is sort of the starting area, but once you've gone to a lot of the places there, you don't know where to go next. You can just go off in almost any direction, and that could potentially put you in a place that you definitely shouldn't be, and then you get obliterated. And so I almost hesitate to use this example because Dark Souls, but I have to. When you play Dark Souls, you can technically go to areas that you're not supposed to go pretty early, but the ability to get to those areas, you need to go through enemies that are difficult to fight, as well as the fact that the choices of paths are more linear, it's more clear. But when you have a game like Deepwoken where there's these big sprawling seas and a bunch of islands, those paths aren't nearly as clear. So you can spend a very significant portion of your time traveling somewhere, get there, and then realize that the enemies you're fighting are way out of your league. And now what do? Do you travel all the way back? Do you randomly go to a different island? Does your cat show up for like the 15th time in the video to try to ruin it? I don't know. But that's sort of what I was referring to. It was less so about a big main quest line of like Skyrim proportions, and more just a general, hey, this is where you should be going next sort of deal. The next thing was in regards to sort of the trial of one. I said, so just like Dark Souls, a lot of Deepwoken is trial and error, but unlike Dark Souls, those errors are punished far harder. Ironically, I found that the trial of one was the most effective trial and error tutorial in the game, as it taught me how to succeed against several important monsters in the game without me having to spend huge chunks of time sailing and such to get back to the places I died. So the question is, do you think that making the trial of one more accessible, or making some sort of practice arena in a similar sense to the trial, would help new players learn the game and feel less intimidated? Ark responded with, definitely. We've heard the same thing a lot. People tend to get good at the game via the trial of one. I think the tutorial ought to have a combat portion too. I thought it did. I mean, it sorta does, sorta doesn't. But regardless, I'm glad we're in agreement on this one. And I think it's almost sort of sad to see the progression between myself from when I started and going to Lower Aricia and what I was doing versus how I was performing after I did the trial. Because it's like night and day. I'm sure a lot of people were watching the general gameplay in the Deepwoken review and wanting to shoot themselves because I was just bad. And a lot of that footage is from when I literally first started, which is why it's so bad, and it makes sense. I'm not like a god right now, but I'm a lot better than when I started. And pretty much all of that was thanks to being able to do the trial. It's a trial and error game, and so you need to try things in order to get better. But I think Lower Aricia in of itself is almost a flawed area of the game, because you go there very early, the risk is very high, you don't have basically any items to your name, so it's very likely that the first group of bandits that you run across are just going to kill you. And that, I don't know, that kind of rubs me the wrong way. There is the trainer on the Isle of Vigils, but that in of itself is sort of hidden. So you need to go out of your way to find that. And then that would also require you to have the patience to sit there and constantly fight against the trainer and lose over and over and over again in order to figure out like a better way of playing. So I don't know. It's sort of, I noticed the same thing I played with my friend Loaf, possibly Loaf, who you've probably seen in some of my videos. And he hasn't played in a really long time, and I saw a lot of the same sort of issues that I saw in him that I saw in myself when I first started playing, where like we'd run into a Megalodon and I'd attack it and he'd try to fight it and he'd get hit like 3 times and be like, yep, I'm almost dead. And it's like, well, how are you supposed to fight that if it kills you in 3 hits and it can spawn on the starter area, you know? So I don't know. I think they need something. Either just direct access for the trial of one very early, maybe make it so that way it automatically unlocks when you hit a certain power level, so it's sort of like a get good check. I don't know, something's got to be done, because it's the difference between someone who's completed the trial and hasn't is staggering. Editor's note. So, I actually talked to Arch Mage after my review video went out, and we had a discussion about the Trial of One, and he was asking me about it. It'll be on screen right now. And basically, the takeaway currently is that this should become available as sort of a new player helper earlier on and be less hidden. Hopefully, either after one character death or under some sort of thing that you can't miss, so it's easier to access and people can have a better tutorial, because it really does sort of function as a better tutorial. We also talked about the depths and the fact that you can just climb right over the wall, and how people that get down there are basically never going to open the gate, how that's kind of stupid, things to change that. And the real end result was make it so when you die and go down to the depths the first time, you get spoken to by potentially a voice or something that tells you that you can open the gate. Move all of the bells closer to the gate so people actually use them instead of jumping over the wall. And then, you know, that whole death area will be explained. So I wanted to add this context just in case, since I have it now and I don't think it would be fair to leave this out. The next thing I asked about was content creator related stuff. And so I said, this one I've got to ask as a creator, but is there or how feasible is a content creator mode? I've been on the platform long enough to know that edgy 14-year-olds love to follow around and jump content creators. Don't I know it, right guys? So is an anonymous mode at all possible? And Arch responded saying, content creators with decent followings are welcome to ask for access to the content creator private server, and we have a feature for particularly big YouTubers for their names to get scrambled in-game. So I kind of figured this existed just because of the sort of track record the game's had and the following and just how important permadeath is. I guess it's weird. I don't know much about them, but I had enough faith in the developers of the game to have something to sort of protect content creators. I don't know if I'll be reaching out to try to make use of some of this stuff. I think, generally speaking, people probably wouldn't necessarily hunt me down or stuff if the guilds weren't so readily available to see, and there's no sort of toggle for that. And I think that's maybe for a good reason. But I almost feel like I was in a guild with my friends for the beginning, but I feel like going forward, I'm just not going to be allowed to be in a guild, because if I am, it's going to be an immediate red flag. If people see the guild I'm in, they just hover over my name and it's like, oh, that's the guy, let's go kill him. So that's sort of a shame, and it cuts off some of that guild related stuff, because I think generally speaking, there aren't a lot of people who are just going out of their way to go into servers and look for who you are, right? That's not... There are people like that. I know there are, because I've had some weirdos when I've accidentally left my joins on. Oh my god, that's a story for another day. But regardless, there aren't a lot of people who are going out of their way to hunt down content creators. So when you go into games, there are certain just like tells that give you away. And I think the guilds thing is one of them. So having some sort of toggle for guild banners or the guild title above your name would probably help with that. But yeah, I appreciate the support here for the creators, because people think it's all fun and games, but it's all fun and games until people are going out of their way to hunt you down. Trust me, I know. And the last question was not totally related to the game itself, but it was, how long do you guys plan to continue working on the game? Deepwoken's been out for I think 2 years now, and I understand that there's supposed to be like 9 layers of the depths. And currently there's 2, so that's a long way to go. Just curious on your outlook and motivation when it comes to development, since I know working on one thing for a long time gets draining. And I've been doing this for not that long, and I know the feeling of burnout. Arch responded and said, I don't know if we'd ever hit the full 9 layers realistically, just because of how long it'd take and what we feel the game is missing in the moment, but we're pretty happy to keep working on Deep for a long time more. The way the game is set up makes it very easy to add stuff to, and we're still really enjoying the process of working on the game. We have a lot of updates we're excited to get out. And that's sort of where our interview ended, because those are all the questions that I had for him. And it's good to hear that they're still passionate about the game and working on it. I was going to ask a question related to the weekly updates, and whether or not they felt that those were a direct, like, good thing for the game or not, because I've seen a lot of sentiment, and I've seen some videos pop up in my recommended, and out of curiosity, I watched them. Watching Roblox videos generally is a no-no, just because I can't stand when I get recommended garbage on my YouTube constantly, but there seems to be a lot of people that are way more invested in like the actual larger content updates and when they actually add things to the game. And so when they do a weekly update every week and they're like rebalancing stuff, and that's pretty much it, or at least that's as far as I understand it, or adding extremely small additions, I almost wonder how much of a draw that really is nowadays. I feel like weekly updates are one of those things that you do when you're trying to make your game super popular, because it keeps people like invested in coming back and always knowing that there's something there. But when you already have a pretty large following, I wonder if it takes away from development to have weekly updates that really don't change or add a whole lot to the game overall, but take away from the time that you would be spending making more stuff for people to do. And I saw a really great thing in my comment section. I doubt I'll be able to find the comment that was talking about this, because someone mentioned down there, and they mentioned that they wished that the developers added more things to do rather than more ways to do the things that are already there. And I understand where that comes from. So that was something I was curious about, but never got around to asking it, because it came up after I'd already talked to him, and I didn't want to bother him again. And then there was the other question of Voidwalkers, and that honestly, Voidwalkers might get its own video, because that is, oh my god, Voidwalkers is such a horrendously awful system that I feel the need, I almost feel the need to talk about it. I probably need to get more footage of people constantly showing up right on top of me while I'm in the middle of doing something else and have half health and they kill me, and it's like, oh, awesome, that was fun. I'm glad I booted up this game today. But yeah. Anyways, that's gonna wrap up today's video. I'm sort of rambling at this point. Some people like the rambly videos, some people don't. I hope you got some context. I hope you maybe had some of your own questions answered when it came to Deepwoken. If you want to see more stuff on the same vein of this, or you want to see that Voidwalker video, let me know, because boy, I'd love to talk about it. So keep me posted. And anyways, that's all for today. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day night wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.